Hello everyone, this is the HappyModel Snapper7. Featuring 703 19,000 kV motors, Crazy Bee F3 flight controller with a built-in 5-amp 4-in-1 ESC. Receivers also built in. 40mm tri-blades. My camera on VTX was faulty, so I swapped it out. Carbon fibers measured 1mm. Motor post to motor post, I'm getting 75mm. It weighs 30.23 grams. It also comes with a 450 milliamp high volt 1S battery, a USB battery charger, a baggie with a set of props remover, rubber bands, and a screwdriver, and receiver instructions. If you remember a few weeks back, I reviewed the UR65, and this is one I really enjoyed, and I'll put that review in a card right up here if you'd like to watch that. And many of the questions that I received are, please compare this to the Snapper6. Well, I don't have the Snapper6, I've only got the Snapper7. But as far as comparing the two, I think this one is much more suited for indoor flight because it's lighter. With the battery, it's even much lighter because this one ships with a 450 milliamp battery, which is quite a bit heavier than the typical like 250 milliamp 1S batteries that we fly these on. The stock batteries that come with this are crazy expensive for some reason. $7.99. I think they must have typoed that or something because that seems way too expensive. We should get 3 for that price. Initially, I also had yaw twitches on this, and you probably noticed in the flight footage that we had a little bit of a noisy twitch there. On this one, when I had that quick snap twitch, All I had to do was relax my screws a little bit, which I must have screwed them down too tight, because when I did the binding, I took the canopy off to do that. And I loosened these up about a half turn or something like that, and then that went away. And the reason behind that is these rubber grommets are made to keep the vibration out of the flight controller, and if they're squished too much, they grab the flight controller too hard, and then the vibrations that you get from props get into your flight controller, and then it builds up and you get a quick jerk or snap or something like that. But in this one, I didn't initially suffer that, but as I flew it more and more, I don't know what has happened, but we've developed a little bit of a snap or twitch on this one as well. I think it's probably due to props and maybe the motor stems not being perfectly aligned anymore. Maybe it's from use. And many people associate both of these motors with the same company. And I'm not certain of that. It could be, but I don't know. But this one I have crashed a lot, and this one I crashed probably less, actually, because I did some really heavy speed runs with this and crashed it a lot, and I would crash at full speed into the stuff in the house, and I really didn't have any problems with it. And this one, I did notice that, and one of the things that I initially said when I had flown this, but people were asking me to compare it to the UR65, was I didn't think this one was as good. And I didn't think it was good for a couple of reasons. One is these metal hoops. It looks real appealing, but it's aluminum, I believe, and it gets bent out of shape, as you can see from the picture on the screen. And so you have to be very careful if you try to spin the props up. If one doesn't spin, you may get an amperage spike, and then your ESC may get actually damaged, unfortunately. So you have to be kind of aware of that. So after each crash, you'll have to go inspect to make sure all your props can move. Otherwise, you could end up with a bad situation for your ESC. You can get them bent back to shape just by squeezing them up, which is all fine and good, but when you've got plastic, it just goes back to the normal shape. You don't have to worry about that stuff so much. So that's one of the downsides of this metal. Now, many of you were looking at this and thought it would be better because we've got a carbon fiber plate and we've got metal, so our motor position is less likely to move. But quite frankly, I didn't find in my sort of flight style that the motor position on the plastic one gave me any sort of PID tuning or flight problems. So I can't give that any weight that we need to have this static hard position with this sort of lightweight machine with these sort of motors. I mean, we're not talking about super torquey motors. They fly well, and they've improved over time. The initial iterations were just terrible. People were losing motor bells, just putting props on and stuff. They were shoving motor shafts right through, or C-clips would pop off, and they're gone forever. So they've made improvements in these motors, but I'm still not certain if these are, really all that durable or not. Now, I have quite a bit of confidence in this one. I keep going back to this one because I crashed this so much, and I've continued to fly it after I posted my review, and I think a number of you have this one. I don't want to make anybody who has this think that it's a bad machine. I think it flies pretty well, but I just think indoor, I can't fly it the way I want to fly it. I want to use, you'll see my camera angle here isn't all that dramatic, and that was because I couldn't really maintain the fast flight that I really like to do inside the house. I had to actually bring the camera angle down quite a bit so I could manage a full flight, because otherwise there's just too much inertia that when you pair it up with this battery, that to get it to stop and change directions in the way I need it to at the speed that I fly in the house, that I would end up crashing a lot. One thing I need to jump back, I forgot to mention, is also I lost some screws. You see one missing there, and you see another one missing there. So if you get one of these, I would suggest maybe pulling those out and putting some blue Loctite on them, because I don't know when those fell out, but I'm quite certain I won't find that tiny little screw. It's probably gone in the vacuum already. So one thing to beware there. And also another downside of metal screws going into other metal pieces is vibration will tend to shake them loose. So be careful. Make sure you're checking your screws before your flights. The camera was pretty odd, and when I got it working and the image looked normal, I could only get about 12 feet away. It was just in my initial test flights here in the basement, and when I got it 12 feet away, then the video would slowly go to static over the last 3-4 feet to where it was just constant static. So I swapped the camera out because I didn't want to bother with going through support and stuff like that. The camera that they have in these are identical as far as I can tell, and the one that I've got sitting over here to the side, they look like the same. They've got the same antennas. So the weight weight that I gave you initially may come in a little bit heavier than what it actually is with a working VTX and all-in-one camera. This has the same flight controller as this one does, so you follow the same binding procedures. You plug in the battery, you press the button, and I believe the lights either go from solid on to flashing and then you bind, or just the reverse of that and you bind it. I bound mine up with the Jumper TSAG, and I used the FrSky X protocol on mine, and that worked just fine. I didn't have any range issues. There's been some discussions about having RX loss issues with this one. I didn't experience that, but this is a multi-protocol radio, so if you're using a standard Tyrannus, I believe the recommended binding procedure here is FrSky 16 D16 mode versus the FrSky 8 mode. I'm not certain, so if you have RX loss, swap it out to one or the other. Another thing I didn't care for is the battery mounting here. We use a rubber band. So if you've got the rubber band, you've got your battery in here and your rubber band. If you skim along the ground, that will tend to topple you, because like in our case, we have hardwood floors. This rubber will grip those hardwood floors on the outside of the battery, and if you get too low, you'll end up kind of toppling over. I can't remember how it happens, but I just remember you can't skid. It doesn't come to a sliding halt. It grips and kind of plops over or something of that nature. And quite frankly, I thought that this is just a better battery mounting. You know, it's easier to get in and out. I don't know, for me and my fingers and short fingernails, grabbing this up isn't necessarily something I'm great at. But it does work, and you obviously can replace the rubber bands, and you can use, maybe you want to go to using some dual lock on there or something of that nature, and you just stick it to there. You'll also notice that this screw is up a little bit, and that's because I use the rear screw back here by tightening that nut to create a little bit of angle with my canopy, so it wouldn't have to just use the front angle piece. And if you didn't see that other review, this canopy, it's kind of a two-piece canopy. You loosen the screws on either side, and then you can angle this canopy up, this inside canopy, and then tighten your screws back up so you can create camera angle that way. So overall, you're probably listening to me and I'm talking about negatively about a lot of these things. And I bring out those negatives because it is very similar to this. I did fly it in horizon mode, and I didn't experience anything that was unusual outside of the twitch that we would get from time to time. And because I was getting that in acro mode, I didn't really, make much of that, because I was already getting in acro mode. You'd expect it in horizon mode. And if you're not familiar with horizon mode, it's a lot like angle mode, where there's self-stabilization going on through the flight controller, so it's always trying to bring you back to level. Many people fly that way inside. Matter of fact, I think the Tiny Whoop racers pretty much all say angle mode. I like acro mode, especially with the brushless stuff. But anywho, I would fly it around the house for a while, and then I would just kind of hover to look for drift, because I know that many people who fly in self-stabilized modes have been sensitive to drifts, or the machines have been sensitive to developing drift, where even though you don't give it any stick put, it would just drift one way or another. I didn't experience that in this particular case with this particular machine. I also flew it outside, and I thought I flew pretty well. I get that question about this one again. I keep going back to this one. These things really aren't meant to fly outside. This one was 20 grams, and this one was, 38 grams or something like that. These things are so light, they're not going to really put up with much of a breeze. Now, in my backyard, even with the wind that I had in the day that I was flying it outside, it handled it quite well, but that's with me staying low, staying behind the house, staying underneath the tree branches. So I've got a lot of stuff knocking that wind down. So actually, where the wind getting to this was probably quite minimal. I would say if you want to fly something like this outside, your mile per hour on the wind probably needs to stay below 10. Probably 5 or nothing would be best. But you can fly it outside. It works nice for close proximity. I would say that if you do fly it outside, be very careful about any time you crash, and if you've got air mode on, disabling or disarming right away when you crash is going to be really important again, because if you've got air mode on, your props are spinning. If something gets in there and stops the props, but the motor's still trying to go, you could end up with a spike that then damages your ESC, and then you've got sadness all over again. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I flew it outside for a couple of packs, and I did go down, and grass and whatnot would get up in there. I did have it where the ESC would reset. You could typically see on screen, because it seems to suck power away from the camera when that does happen, and then the camera will go to a low power, so you get a lot of static in the goggles. So you know that, hey, I can't take off again, and I would not recommend really trying very hard when you go down to take off again when you're flying, especially outside where something could have gotten through here. I think if you've you've got one of these and you've beaten it up and you've maybe become frustrated, and my plan with my particular unit is I bought a Beta FPV 75 brushless frame here. It's plastic, of course. I think I got these for $11 off of eBay, and two of them, as you can see there, two of them. I'm going to transfer this over here just because these motors, I suspect over time I'll end up losing all the screws that are holding the hoops on. You can see I've already got, this coming out. So I just think this is a better option. And it's got a battery tray built in there. You can't really see it, but right in there, there's a battery tray. So we can get our battery right in there. So I won't have to be so worried about the rubber bands sticking to the carpet remnants that are laying around the house, or the rugs and getting hung up on those and toppled, or the rubber just sticking to the other surfaces of the house and toppling that way. I should be able to skim along and maybe recover a little bit better. So more flight fun in that direction. So I'll be transferring this over and enjoying more flight with it. And if you're not familiar with the community tab on the channel, I should bring your attention to that. We got to 10,000 subscribers, and YouTube kind of rolls out features to channels as you get more subscribers. I don't really appreciate that very much, because I could have used this community tab a long time ago. Typically I'll post sales on my Facebook page or Twitter, and I don't think that too many of you see that stuff. So I've been posting, I think I've only got one or two, I've been posting sales that have come up that I thought you guys might be interested in on the community tab, and you will only see that in the mobile version. So if you're looking at it on your phone, you will find that you only see the sales on the community section through the phone subscription feed. You won't find that in your subscription feed on the desktop. So if you're looking for that, you have to go to the YouTube or my YouTube channel's home, so to speak, where you have the tabs across the top. It says home, videos, playlist, community, and community is where I post those. So if you're not a mobile YouTube viewer, you may want to hit that community channel on somewhat of a regular basis, because I think that's a much better place, because I think more people will see it. And I noticed in my few posts that I've had here that I've gotten more feedback from that. So that's probably what I'm going to do. I've gotten very, very little feedback from Twitter or on Facebook. Usually if I post something, I might get 2 comments. So I don't know how many people are actually seeing it, but it seems like more people see it on the community tab via mobile. But if you're not a mobile user, again, hop over onto the desktop version through your web browser. I'll also link the product down at the bottom if you want to get something that it's probably slightly better outside than the UR65, just because it's heavier. So that's just physics. It's going to handle more wind. If you look at the profile, the hoops are smaller on the Snapper7, so it's going to handle more wind. It's bigger than the 65, so it's going to handle wind. As for those questions as to the Snapper6, I don't have one, so I can't honestly answer those. Every answer I would give you in comparison to this and the Snapper6 is going to be a guesstimate or an estimate. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please leave those in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.